those of you who know me might find what I'm about to say a bit strange, only because I seldom praise men. My guest today is someone I deeply admire because uh, above and beyond the very just and fancy titles that he carries of being a restorative architect and a heritage design specialist, when I look at him and when I interact with him, he is essentially to me a very, very artistic and creative soul. And the flip side of that same coin is that he's also deeply aware and sensitive. I have been a self confessed admirer and fan of his work in the architectural realm. But even apart from that, he is sartorially a certain way. He speaks with a certain care and sensitivity and empathy. And all of his kind of life pursuits are in sync from those perspectives. There's no incongruency. Um, uh, uh, he is somebody whose wife and partner has started and founded now many years ago Jaipur's only alternative education school, in which I know he's been an integral part in kind of not just having it designed and constructed, but also in terms of just evolving its ethos, the way it functions. He's omnipresent, and his sort of again his thought process and sensibility is very much part of that institution, and that's just one example of the other pursuits that I'm referring to. um, and that's why it makes imminent sense, just like we did our previous dialogue with Amit, if you may remember, that instead of going on harping on the deficits and the emotional shortcomings of men in this mental health awareness month, that we should talk to and about some men who have had a certain amount of evolution, because things are changing, and it's only fitting that we talk about more positive ways forward. So I'm very, very happy and privileged that Gagan Sharma is joining us. I really want to thank him for making the time at such short notice, being a real sport, and for indulging us. Gagan, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Karthik. And I think it is incredible actually that you are raising this issue of mental health in men, because I think a lot of times that aspect is sort of skipped, maybe because of patriarchy or the society that we live in. But yeah, but I think it is extremely essential, and I see a lot of men who are struggling within, but they don't end up really expressing. So yeah, thank you so much for taking this up.
Absolutely. And I think part of the reason also why it gets lost, and you're perhaps too polite to mention it, is that feminists make too much noise. So we get drowned out in that noise. And it so happens that, all this sort of attention and focus, whether it's of the media, etc., tends to become about women and women's issues. Anyway, be that as it may, now, as I mentioned, I know it's a slightly broad and vague sort of question, but clearly there are priorities that you've identified, whether consciously or unconsciously, of a certain way that you lead your life. And there are aspects I know also for a fact from talking to you that you're constantly working on to further understand, evolve, grow as you go along. It's fair to say that to a lot of men, these are things that wouldn't even occur pretty much through the course of life. So, give us a sense of where this question mark or this quest or this desire to know more and address certain things relating to emotional understanding, maturity, etc., even came from, and at what point in your life? I mean, was there a particular event that compelled you to look in this direction, or how did it happen?
Yeah. So if I look at me growing up, and I think most of our formative years, especially the younger years, are where a lot of us who we are now is also created. So if I look back into my formative years, I would say the influence of my father, especially from this perspective, uh, made me where he was not really someone who would be very notional, as in that you have to do things like this. So he did not carry a lot of notions. I mean, of course, he is a patriarch of the family, and he has certain way that he lives his life. But other than that, I think his artistic bend, his attitude of questioning, and also his way of not really putting pressure on us, as in you do whatever that you wish to do, and a person is here to fulfill his destiny. And I think a lot of those conversations happen in early childhood, and also his view of life, where it is uh, contentment was like a broad way of the way he leads his life. So I think those were the uh, initial things that shaped while I was growing up.
But if I
Uh,
can just quickly interrupt here,
yes,
this is really really significant, and touch wood. I mean, it almost sounds like this unreal blessing and privilege, because usually you find patriarchs to be quite the opposite. It's my way or the highway. You're saying he wasn't notional. In fact, they tend to be extremely so. And there are kind of sort of non-negotiable ways in which they lead their own lives, and they've come to believe that that's the only way of being.
yes. So yeah, so I mean, I think that was my, and of course, I mean, otherwise our family is very traditional. We lived in a joint family in the old city of Jaipur, where we still do. So there is that sense of traditional upbringing which is there. But I think this aspect, because other than this, I see most of the family that I sort of move around in, especially my elders, had a certain way of, and also, in fact, incredibly so, my dadi was also very open in general about things. So I think it has also sort of come
That's
down
probably
from
where it
there.
came from,
Yes,
exactly.
and he was a very strong woman. So I think that idea of how to not be very notional came from that perspective.
Hmm.
So yeah, so those
And
were my
again, I'm sorry I'm interrupting, because these are such interesting but important nuances. The concept itself of being able to be strong without being notional. That,
yes,
because to a lot of people, strength would manifest in that manner.
yes, that's true. So yeah. So those were my initial years, but there was this one significant thing or a program that I did, and I think generally the way, and I do not know from where this aspect comes, where I am very open to learning. I'm open to sort of inquire, question. So at some point in time, and of course there was some emotional things that had happened in my life too. So I was dealing with those issues, and I happened to come across Landmark Forum. So I happened to go there once, attend it. So for the first time in my life, what I realized, that there could be those questions, there could be those perspectives, and which there could be that language also, which we do not have communication in, where we have never questioned ourselves, where we have never questioned from where do the notions also come from, or can those notions be broken? Can there be a different viewpoint? So I think that was.
As far as landmark is concerned, which obviously proved to be a landmark in your life itself, um, and it's I think it's important to kind of underscore that. Give us through specific examples, if you can, some of these central questions that you came face to face with at landmark.
I think the most significant aspect about landmark for me then was, so so first of all, identifying your shortcomings, so-called shortcomings, in the sense that what are your fears or how do you operate. So you're sort of looking back inwards was the most significant thing. Otherwise, most of my life, till that point, the blame or the questioning or things going wrong were out of my purview. It was outside of me. So there was always a viewpoint where uh, I could point fingers to someone. Uh,
It was always
However,
external.
it was always external. So that so landmark made me go through, say, my childhood memories, and from where, say, for example, there was one very important aspect that I could. So there was, I had a lot of fear of being alone, and the fear, and a lot of my life decisions were based on that fear,
Yeah, or rather,
and
imprisoned and or governed by that fear.
yes, and a lot of my decisions, for example, my always seeking a company for doing, even in my business or otherwise. So there was this very strong notion that I would carry, and I would feel that this is all right. And in fact, I would always, I would talk about it, that it is always good to have people to go together or work. But for the first time, and I could see the shortcomings also, and this was the time when I could see them. And then I went back in time, and then I sort of figured out, okay, this was the incidents that happened, whatever. So they have their own
Correct,
way
correct,
that
correct.
they
Of course.
do
Yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which could I mean, at least what it does is that, whether true or not, but it does make you figure it out, is the first thing. And then second thing is take action on once you have figured it
Absolutely.
out.
Right.
So I think that was one very significant aspect in my life, where that made me feel very confident in general, and sort of doing things by myself became much easier. And at least if I fall back into that pattern today, I know that it's a pattern that I'm falling back into.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a wonderful, wonderful, and such a critical example. Also, because oftentimes when we develop certain, let's say, unhealthy or negative patterns of behavior, our mind can be so devious that it further convinces ourselves that ये तो अच्छे कारण से हुआ है या ये अच्छी
Mm.
चीज है.
Mm. No, absolutely. I mean, I think always our mind it doesn't want to get questioned by itself. So I mean, it's a very tricky software here, where whenever you want to audit it, it's a very difficult task to look back inwards to show it a mirror. But I think this is what this thing did, and then post that, there have been different programs that have been sort of taking,
Hmm.
and then there was, I found someone who his name is Nakul Agarwal. So I found him, and then had a discussion with him around certain aspects about spirituality, which to me earlier was a very mystical thing. And then from that point onward, became a very logical thing. So
Hmm.
again, it's the trick that your
Yeah,
mind
yeah,
plays,
yeah.
and understanding it, understanding your own software, I think became essentially
Also,
important.
we inherit so much of our belief system without even applying any kind of personal logic, research or anything,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
if generally speaking the belief in a particular family is कि अरे ये तो सब voodoo है, तो हम वो ही मान के चल लेंगे.
Yes. Yeah. No, and I think that is how it is. No, our life, when we think that we have a control of our life, We actually do not, because everything that we have, uh, that we think that we have, even our name, is being given by someone else. So, and then we associate with the tags. So, name is also a tag, and that has been given to us. So, you are like this, you are
Yep.
like that, and from childhood only, we keep on saying, "Oh, look at this kid, he's so shy," or "This one, my daughter is this, or my son is this," and you keep on labeling them without even knowing about those things. So,
Absolutely.
I think it we inherit those tags in our lives, and then we think that we are those tags, and
Yep.
then it is so difficult to remove those tags and to look first, see whether those tags exist on us. So awareness is the first thing, and then working on it is the second thing, that how do you remove them then.
And
But
also through this process, which completely I resonate with, what becomes especially challenging, at least in my own personal experience and in my observation, is to remain objective.
yes,
And which is why I think, at least initially, when one embarks on this kind of journey, uh, um, it's always a good idea to have some kind of support. I'm not saying
yes,
XYZ modality, whatever works for you, but some support.
I completely 100% agree on that. And I think uh, when I got into relationship with Gurpreet, and when we sort of moved ahead, I think this was one place which today, till today, it is that is where we completely resonate 100%. And a lot of times we, amongst us only, we have these discussions. We have this entire questioning idea. If there's something that is bothering me, I would talk to her, not from the idea that I would want a quick fix, but I
Hmm.
think it is the intention of inquiry that
Hmm.
say, listen, this is what is happening, and what do we do about it, or what should
Hmm.
I do about it? And doing about it is not about, say, external doing, but it is the internal doing. So I think a lot of it, that support came from her being there in my life,
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
very, very similar, because I mean, that is what Anuja did for me, for the most part, and then and now, thankfully, we're at a stage where we are able to do it for one another.
Yes, no, absolutely, it is the same. And I think that is where and of course, when you look at all these things are intermingled only, no. So you think, so while that this landmark happened, I went for few trainings where our inclination happened because we knew that something is not fit while that we were growing up, the schooling or the system. So we started to question them, and then I went to few. I've attended few sessions and workshops around with Waldorf, parenting workshops and things like that. So it has been a continuous learning. Today
Yep.
also, if anything comes up, I am the first one to enroll for it, because I know that it life is a continuous learning, and only through learning something is when you'll be able to erase something which has been a notion that has been from before.
Absolutely. In any case, the entire idea at a very fundamental level of just learning and openness to learning, and treating life to be a student of it until one's dying day, is something that, that was one of the first things I was told when I started learning Hindustani vocal. कि तुम literally मरते दम तक सीखते ही रहोगे.
सीखते रहोगे, बिल्कुल सही है. एंड आई
Uh,
थिंक
uh,
द जॉय इज इन एक्चुअली लर्निंग. अगर आपने
Absolutely.
सीख लिया ना, तो उसके बाद में द जॉय इज लॉस्ट, बिकॉज
In any case, the moment
वन.
you tell yourself कि मैंने सीख लिया, you've stopped your evolution.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think the joy and of discovery and finding something new, and I think that's where the real joy of life also exists. When we say that we seek experiences, essentially what we are doing is there is something newness that we are bringing into our life through travel, through, say, owning something, through buying something. So we are always seeking something new. So at the fundamental of anything that we are doing is about the sense of newness, and what happiness does it give you joy. So I think that is
Sense
what
of
I then.
newness and the sense and experience. We you use that very powerful word. The experience automatically to me means process, journey, etc., and not the
Yes,
end goal. We've become
yes,
so obsessed with the end goal. You said such a beautiful thing when you said that when you, for example, sit and have certain discussions with Gurpreet, it's not about finding that quick solution. The
yeah,
same thing is happening with parents. They will send their children to a drama class because at the end of that workshop there must be a play on stage. If you
yes.
remove that element, no one will enroll.
That's so true. We are so driven by outcomes.
So this whole outcome obsession is fine, but it's now coming at the cost of diluting the process entirely.
Yes, that's true. I think the whole idea of whether you want to learn something for your own joy versus you learn something for you take it and then you put it out. I think there are two different aspects around it, and of course, while that you're learning, of course, there will be a performative
Of
outcome of it
course.
also. But the objective should not be that. Yeah.
I was listening to a beautiful talk the other day where this very experienced teacher was saying that he was talking about exam obsession. And he said that examinations used to be a diagnostic tool,
Yes.
and now they have become the goal.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And
Yes.
that is the shift that's happened, which has,
No, and this is so evident now, and it is not only evident in my life. I see so many of them. People who have sort of went through something, cracked IIT, and then there was a complete slump post IIT when they were like, "What do we do here? What are we
yeah,
doing here?" So I think that is, you see it across
the
the
board.
spectrum. In my own life, I have experienced those things. So yeah,
Very quickly, before I want to ask you about something directly related with your architecture practice, you also mentioned, and we've talked about the openness and desire and hunger to keep learning. And you were kind of, a little unsure about where that got birthed. Not that it's very important to identify it, but maybe that happened at Carnegie Mellon because it tends to be this very sort of, Western American kind of approach, isn't it? That you keep learning and evolving. Maybe.
yeah, could be. One thing for sure, when I went there, it was a complete shock for me, and and and, uh, and that is, I think that was also a significant point. As you mentioned, I have never thought of it. Now that you are saying that, I'm now thinking about it. Because till then, and my biggest impact of that would be reflecting on the education or the education system here. So I went there, and the way that we were taught throughout school and in colleges were always around. It was something was given to us. We would take that material, we would process it, and then we will use whatever. And it was essentially about your memory. So you would memorize it, and then you would just simply vomit it on a piece of paper. Mostly, of course, there's analytical part and those things as well, but there was always an instruction which was given to us, or instructive way of learning, where somebody would give you an instruction and then you would follow that instruction. Here, the biggest shift was there was no instruction.
Yeah.
We had to create our own instructions. We had to create our own. There was no textbook. There was no course book. I
So
had
I
to
don't. I mean,
find.
correct me if I'm wrong. Having had the privilege of experiencing both systems myself, to me, the greatest shift, which thankfully didn't come as such a shock to me because I'd been neat enough to become that way already. That is that you suddenly find yourself in an environment where you're given tremendous autonomy and agency, and
Yes.
there is a certain abstractness and randomness and freedom and liberty to kind of explore and go about things, define things yourself. You can decide how you want to approach a
Yes.
particular task and the contours of its answers and responses. And to
Yes.
a lot of Indians and South Asians, because there's very little culture of encouraging our children to express themselves and their opinions, that
Yeah.
ability only is inherently missing.
Yeah, and we are talking 20 years back. I mean, I went to US 20 years back. So then, for the first time, there was an open book exam, and I was like, okay, well, it's an open book exam. Let's see. And then I was like, it was such a, it was the worst and the most difficult paper that I gave, because essentially it is not about what is, you have to figure out, and there is a, sense of uh, question, and the way you question is more important than finding answers. and
Absolutely.
and there was a huge shift, and I we had to take a, I mean, we had to catch a, uh, running and catching the train, because the speed of my program was very fast. But that was the first time when I realized that there's a huge difference as to how, and it is so, I mean, and I think that questioning also then became the premise for also figuring out something for our daughter later. But yes,
Hmm.
you are right that openness could be partly to Carnegie Mellon for sure.
Now, you work in a specific niche as far as your architectural practice goes. Let me draw a food analogy, surprising I hadn't till now, where a lot of chefs who are, again, aware, sensitive, mindful, have been propagating for a while to use necessarily local produce, to use seasonal produce, kind of in the same way. You consciously try to upcycle, reuse materials, certainly source from your vicinity, the geographical proximity, etc. All of those elements are very important. Where did that kind of consciousness come, or was it, you think, part or an implicit part of the larger consciousness that was growing inside of you? And I'll tell you why I asked this, because it then does become a very, very finite niche, right? So
Yes.
presumably you could be doing a lot more quantum of work if you weren't kind of so strict about these things.
So I think, because you mentioned Carnegie Mellon, now that I'm going back, so even before that, while I was in my college, uh, while I would design. It was generally a thing that why I'm doing this, or I would question about things and the way I had seen things. So I think there was this art of seeing that also, I think, came from some bit from my father, because I think he has been a keen observant about art in general. So that came from him. However, I did sustainable design in Carnegie Mellon. So I went, and then they were talking about a lot of things which were sort of Western, uh, as an idea
Hmm.
about living. Because see, built spaces are nothing but spaces which are to be used by humans for performing different tasks in their day-to-day lives. So
Yeah.
whether you're sleeping, you need a bedroom, or so on and so forth. So the approach to sustainable design was also through a lot of material innovation, uh, which would actually have a lot of energy, embodied energy. So there would be inherent questions that would come to my mind, and I would ask, but why are you doing this? I mean, what's the need? So, for example, make a glass box and then have a triple glazed glass unit, which would have a low penetration of sun rays, or which would have a high UV value. So, U value. So essentially, first create a problem and then figure out a solution, because I think the approach there is essentially to to engineer a lot of things,
Hmm.
uh, and I think also looking back is slightly primitive from their viewpoint is what I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They are not scalable solutions or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the engineered solutions are scalable. So
Hmm.
that's the viewpoint that a lot of them carry. So when I was doing that, then I think a lot of times you also learn by doing something so that you know that you do not want to do that in
Sure, of
future.
course.
So that is something that was very categorical for me, that the whatever that they have done is not really how it should be done. So that is first. Of course, there was again in that also there was a questioning.
Hmm.
Why? So
Hmm.
that has been the bottom line. Why am I doing what I am doing? Is like broadly a continuous question that I keep asking. Then I when I came back, I was doing modern buildings, few projects that I was doing. Then I started to work with Jal Mahal project, and I think interacting with a lot of people there, and I was talking to a lot of consultants all from across the globe, people who were teaching in Howard and Yale and the biggest of the firms. And we were closely associated for
Hmm.
almost
Hmm.
2.5 years,
Hmm.
continuously working.
Hmm.
So I would say I did my PhD, not formally, but
Hmm. Absolutely.
partly from there. And it opened me up to this idea that there could be something which is aesthetically sustainable also. I mean, and something which is logical, which is built before, is coming from the wisdom of thousands of years, and when there were least resources. So the resourcefulness is the most when you have least external available cooling devices. If you don't have air conditioning, you would have to be very, very, very smart to create a solution
Yeah.
without using technology. So first, make it as passive as possible. Then you can add technology, and
Hmm. Hmm.
that became my premise.
Hmm.
But then
Hmm.
later on, I did all the things. Where I was doing a startup, I suddenly sort of got this idea that I should do startup. Then from there, I thought that okay, let me do my regular practice. So I indulged in the regular making houses, and then from there, one day I was sitting and I like, but what joy am I getting out of it? What is the purpose of all this? And that led me to shift slightly and gradually towards this kind of work. And you are, as you're right, there's not a lot of work which is
Yeah,
there.
because ये both मजे की बात है, but मजा I am saying at the expense of the lesser work ostensibly that somebody like you has. Because see, I see a direct contrast and contradiction between sociologically where India and Jaipur is, where the aspiration of a majority of people who are seeking these kinds of services will be in the arey ye jardo marvel this that and all, which inherently then is wasteful and flamboyant and kind of then sort of flouts all those principles that one wants to stick to.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So this, however, what has also happened is that what I've realized, that you do one thing, and then you do it with all the heart, and then it becomes slightly your base point for people to also
Absolutely.
look at you. So I think then I focused, as I was also doing other things, but started to put my focus onto
Right.
this side of things, and once one project or two projects or three projects happened, then I think
Yeah, yeah.
the
Then you are in a sense also creating the category. Also, I think there's a वो उसमें हमेशा layers होते हैं ना सोसाइटी में. तो एक वो जो सेक्शन है जो उस तरफ वैसे भी बढ़ ही रहा है because that is the evolution cycle they are on.
yes.
They'll get you.
No, and I think yes, and also what has happened is that I could always see that there is a possibility within, say, Jaipur, and I think I'm lucky to be in Jaipur because I think there's a lot of influence of Jaipur itself for me,
Sure.
uh, and where I stay in the old city, and have been moving through this fabric of the old city, and which I think is absolutely stunning. It's not
Hmm.
the problem is it's the modern. things which have gotten into the issues where, say, traffic, all the automobiles,
बिल्कुल.
and it has not been planned. So
Yeah, yeah,
the issues are more administrative than the quality of urban fabric.
for sure.
So I've been moving around this, and I think there was, and of course with Jal Mahal, with other projects that I've been doing, it shaped me and my thinking, where I thought that okay, it is very essential to work with the context of Jaipur, and it is very essential to all. And does these spaces give me joy?
Hmm,
And not just me, any
hmm,
other person.
hmm,
So,
hmm.
so today, if I'm moving in a house which has a beautiful courtyard, which we fortunately have here, so does it give me joy? And yeah, it comes with some inconveniences, with some bit of dust and all that. But
Huh, but
other than that,
that's a tiny trade-off for what must be infinite
yes,
joy.
yes. So there is a lot of joy in moving around when you are moving in open, going into closed spaces. You have spaces in where you can play cricket, you can do your own things.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Uh, so
unbridled. I mean, that's what would be luxury to me.
exactly. So I mean, I think then the question was, what is luxury? And I started to question what really is luxury. And uh, I think still what has happened is that slowly and gradually, very very small number of people are again wanting to come into this domain. I think there are a lot of architects or architecture driven students, especially the young kids. They find this very attractive.
Hmm, hmm,
However, the masses are
hmm,
not at the same
hmm,
pace
hmm,
as
hmm,
to their
hmm,
sensitivity, or
hmm.
they have
And
many
that
new
would
money.
never be the case anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that is true. But I think more if more number of people come on this side, then
वो
at least
शिफ्ट
there
हो
will be
जाएगा, हाँ.
worship ho jayega slowly and gradually. And I think for everything, I believe that one needs to have one project, one catalytic. So
Correct.
if you want to say that, okay, make me something, and I would say, look at that, and
Hmm.
do I have an example?
Yep,
So
yep, yep.
so Jaipur did not have a lot of examples earlier, but I think slowly and gradually there are more examples which are coming about.
And now, in any case, like you said yourself, I mean, I wouldn't be able to give examples of things you've done for clients, but your own some
Yes.
spaces, etc. There's That's such a wonderful kind of showcase. Almost
Yes.
of a reference point to something in brick and mortar that's been realized so beautifully that people can go and look at and experience.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And I think that Padma, which has recently been done, there are a few more examples which are not which did not become hospitality projects, but they are lovely examples. And I
Yeah.
think we can again restitch the fabric which was broken.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this is unending. Finally, and to sort of tie this back into where we started, um, again, very, very broad question, but by and large, have you found that, and I'm not comparing, but the type of inner inquiry and certain changes and evolutions and certain things perhaps you realized needed fixing, that you have embarked on, do you feel or do you see a significant percentage of men anywhere close to that from what you observe around you, or unfortunately are still a vast majority of men very much kind of in that invisible prison of patriarchy?
I mean, vast majority of them are in invisible prism of patriarchy. So, so I think of course, openness essentially is very essential. I think it's the prerequisite if you want to really look within. Also, the second is that there's a lot of fear. I have spoken with men who would not really mind exploring this side, but there is a lot of fear that I have seen in them, and fear essentially is also breaking the notions, which, and through those notions they are so called successful. So
Hmm.
for a lot of men, uh,
Can you
money is,
contextualize that? मतलब,
yes,
हाँ.
Yeah, I'm coming to that point. So for a lot of men, money is the say
Ultimate, huh?
ultimate goal. It is the thing to define your success.
Correct. The main
अगर मैं
benchmark.
अगर मैं महीने का इतना रुपया कमाता हूँ
Correct, correct,
तो आई एम सक्सेसफुल, और अगर कोई वो नहीं कमा रहा है तो वो अनसक्सेसफुल है.
correct.
एंड दिस इज देयर वर्ल्ड व्यू.
Hmm.
And this is the circle that they move in, the clothes that they wear, the cars that they drive, the travel plans that they do. So everything is centered around the idea of money. Okay. Another question is that a lot of them, because they so for example, the notion where so however that they would want to explore something or be open to, example, landmark forum. So for them it would be, if I would have told a lot of people to do this forum, either they would have they would have done it very in a very
Secretively?
disinterested
Acha, okay.
manner, or or uh, they would have not done it. And
Hmm.
why? The question would be, I do not want things to change within me, because what if something change, and I am in a very safe, happy, successful zone,
Hmm.
and if something shifts, then it will be complicated in
हाँ, तो
my.
मतलब जब सब सॉर्टेड चल ही रहा है ना.
हाँ हाँ हाँ. तो उनके लिए वो है कि सब कुछ सॉर्टेड है, एंड ये मेंटल हेल्थ हो गई या इश्यूज हो गए, वो तो वैसे ही उन्होंने दबा लिए हैं अपने अंदर. सो इट हैज बीन सो रिप्रेस्ड दैट whenever that comes about, it is either completely ignored, or it is basically camouflaged by doing something else. So I have seen people taking up drinking, or sort of maybe there are people who would also play, like go and play or do
हाँ, but
something
there
else.
is a lot of negative coping mechanism which also is they are blissfully unaware of कि वो negative coping mechanism है.
Yes, है. और वो होने की वजह से, of course, I mean, you only come to realize it when you are in your mid 40s and so on, because that's when the body starts to show the toll that it has taken. And I think this is actually a wonderful age to sort of see, if you see your body and you see that there are issues with your own physical self, that is directly associated with your mental
For sure.
things. So yeah, so a lot of men I see are essentially trapped in that entire notion.
Well, I mean, your response is saddening but unsurprising. You are also a father to a fairly young individual. Do you see in any manner? I mean, obviously, children can't be expected to have the kind of intellect to make these sorts of analysis. But do you see fundamentally some differences and evolution in younger people? Perhaps more openness, at least?
I cannot really generalize it, to be very honest, because I've seen all kind of young people. Uh, I can surely talk about my daughter, because I think from the very beginning she has been part of uh, our approach to
Sure.
parenting, or the education,
Or life
essentially,
generally, also, just
or
your.
and life in
Yeah.
general. Yes, 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 yes. And so I do see things which I at times don't see in other kids, uh, and I think these are just coming from the observation, because you have at least a viewpoint, and then you can see and uh, try to connect the dots. So that is something that we have the privilege to do, because we have been part of the system.
Hmm.
Otherwise, for someone else, it might not just even occur. So
Yeah, so
uh,
that is, I mean, what you're essentially pointing to is that very, very prevalent and unshakable phenomenon of the generational ripple and legacy, which just goes on and on and on, because
yes.
you take that entire kind of value system and just as it is pass it on.
So, I mean, I think if we look at each generation, so your kids are essentially in initial years are reflection of you.
Sure, of
Uh,
course.
And later on also, I mean, you would see families, and only few people in the family would be here or there, but most of them would have a certain
Would be in a
pattern,
certain mold.
in a certain mold, and families would also have it. And if somebody is a player, is a good cricketer, for example, their kids would also tend to be in sports or in similar things.
Sure.
So, I think one very important aspect, that while that before I could came across Waldorf, and a beautiful place that me and Gurpreet visited, which initiated this thought, and then fortunately things sort of worked in a way that we could have a school for our own child. But I think one of the very important aspect was also, first of all, understanding yourself
Hmm.
about the things before you preach to the kids.
Absolutely.
So when you say they're reflection of you, and especially in the initial years, what is it that you need to do is you need to clear your own mirror, before, so that they'll be able to see clearly,
Absolutely.
and that's what happened. That initially it was all about, okay, we are doing this thing wrong. This is not the right way if we want this kind of result. So continuously inquiring again how we are doing things, and not really being preachy to Ayana, is what we could see initially. And of course, there were certain absolute don'ts. So, for example, it's a small but significant example, because screen is a very important world that we are living in. Uh, so, we would not watch things. We would watch after she would sleep initially, and slowly and gradually we stopped watching TV, because we started to also, amongst ourselves, also started to read more than to watch, and a lesser screen time would give more family time to us, and things like those. So I think those were certain things which were very, very important for us as a family to
Again, I mean, fundamentally, what you've said is arguably the most significant point we've kind of touched upon today, which is a very, very brutal self assessment before you can embark on that parenting journey, because children only learn by observation and they only learn
yes,
modeled behavior. And
yes,
so, when a parent comes in and is shocked that their child doesn't read, but they've themselves never picked up a book.
yes, that's true. And you can't say that, okay, you read and they see that you don't read. So there is no authenticity and honesty there. So I think that is also something which is very essential. In fact, in emotional side of things also.
Absolutely.
So could you express your emotion in front of your kids? There could be conversations which you do not want to make with them about certain subjects, but I think it is essential to also share what is happening within,
Most
because unless
certainly.
you share, they would not understand this aspect of how to handle emotions, or also to see you as a human, because I think most of the time we see kids as kids, but they are individual human beings on this planet. They have just lesser number of years on this planet,
Yeah, but they
other
happen
than.
to be like hyper perceptive and receptive and
Exactly. There's so
yeah.
much to learn from their wisdom, and a lot of things that they would come and say just like that, just the way they see it, unadulterated, is what we would say.
I think one of the most significant things in those formative years, because you brought up emotions, which is again so critical, is for both parents, for both genders, is critically to be modeling a neutrality, which kind of instills this permanent belief that oh, so dad cries, he laughs, mom cries, she laughs. All of
Yes.
that is so, so, so important to do, because this whole thing of men are these stoic robots and yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
we can look at it as an opportunity rather than as a, oh God.
And I think occasionally also having some arguments, which how much, however evolved that you could be, you would end up having those, and bringing, taking them inside a room and then coming out. But kids can still process it. They
Of
can see
course.
the body language, the
Yeah,
coldness.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I think at times having these some arguments in front of the kids is also not something which is not okay. I mean, it is fine. Only, of course, the subject of it, because they would also see, like, if me and Gurpreet end up in this time when she is around 12, 13, then she would tell us. In fact, in earlier times also, we would call her a peacemaker in our house.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So our daughter plays the same role on
exactly. So
occasion. And but it's
yes,
also like you said, everything in a balanced manner. Obviously, it's important for them to be aware that conflict exists. It's perfectly natural.
exactly, exactly. And how to then deal with the conflict also is would come out of that only, no.
Absolutely.
And then they
Absolutely.
would see that how the parents are dealing with it. So I think that is where the modeled behavior would come in. And I think for yourself only to inquire how do us as adults handle conflict is something, then you do not need to teach your child directly. If you do it, they would
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it
yeah.
and learn
Anyway,
it.
that's the only real way they learn. I mean,
Yeah. Preaching cannot. If you are doing something else and you are preaching, then it is of no
then
use.
it's just hypocrisy, and at some point they'll even call you out on it. So
They will call you out for sure, 100%.
great.
So yeah,
That's been I mean, we've really overshot. I really overshot because it's been such a good chat, and that's just it's so vast. But really, really thankful again for you sharing your views. Very, very critical things. I think all of us. I think there's this, and I was telling Amit also. There's this kind of quiet. Respect and admiration I have because actually, the kind of conversation you and I have had just now, this is not news to me in the sense that you are somebody who thinks this way, which is, what really more than anything else, these are the elements that, at least for Anuja and I, for example, make us put our child into Uday and not, what's on a brochure or in a presentation. I mean, not to take away from that, but yeah, so great. Thank you very much. I hope that you continue endlessly on your quest to evolve and affect that change for certain people around you. That's all we can do. We can't bring about
yes,
revolutions, but
yeah,
it's very, very important that even if one, two individuals in their little families can start to do it, it'll kind of proliferate.
absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of this self inquiry also gives you clarity, and I
Absolutely.
think that is very, very essential in any decision that you make. And how do you see life in general? I could have a lot of resources, but I could still be stressed. Versus, I can have slightly less, and which is also all right. But what am I? Is there a balance? And could I look at other things also? Am I finding joy in what I'm doing? And I think the continuous question as to what I am doing, why I am doing it, is very, very essential. Even if you're dealing with your kids, even if there is a conflict, what I am doing. So, looking inward, asking yourself that question, I think is the bottom line for at least starting the journey to find right answers for
Yeah,
yourselves.
and but you also said a very, again, a significant thing which I find myself repeating to all of my students that, this is a lifelong inquiry that needs to be revisited regularly because we are all
Yes.
hopefully dynamic and evolving people. And so ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने एक पर्टिकुलर एज और स्टेज पे कुछ फिगर आउट किया और फिर वो आपने स्टैम्प पेपर पे लिख के कोर्ट में जमा कर दिया है.
You won't believe I know people who live with notions that this something happened and it worked for them then, and then for them it becomes a notion, and that notion carries on in their life journey. So living without notions, being adaptive to changing situations, changing
Internal
environment,
and external.
and both is so essential, I feel. And so I think adaptability is something that we are really not taught. I mean, imagine a software which was launched in 2004 when I completed my education, and imagine if there was no update in that software.
Absolutely.
So it is exactly, it's a continuous software update that we need to do.
Absolutely.
And how do you do it is, of course, through having conversation, finding like-minded people, which at times, initially at least, I used to find challenging in Jaipur, and having forums where one can express. And I think this is really kudos to you that you able to have these conversations where people can at least express, because I think the most challenging today is this whole, there is no space for expression. And I think uh, you cannot express in your families because you would be seen in a certain way. You cannot
Absolutely.
express on public places. Of course, you need a lot of courage for doing that. You cannot, people end up making anonymous accounts, and maybe they would express it online, but if they are doing it through their own portal, they are being again
Judged,
judged.
etc. Yeah.
So I think there are so less avenues to express, so
Yeah.
people might as well just put it, shove it inside, bury it somewhere inside them. And I think with men, that I think is a major challenge.
Major.
Women
Yeah.
can still,
Absolutely.
women are able to express uh,
One
with
another.
themselves, one another. But I think with men, that is also not expected. So
That will
bringing
almost
out,
never happen. I mean, in 99% gatherings of men, everything under the sun except anything remotely related to emotions will be discussed.
never,
So,
it will never. so I think, so I think that is where the challenge is. There is no expression for men, and I think having more of these conversations around expression for men would be very, very important.
yeah. Well, thank you very much. Take care,
Thank you.
and we'll see you soon.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Karthik.